You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 578, Imperfection.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we give our cortical nodes a workout by examining an episode of Star Trek, picking apart the morals, meanings, and messages, and asking if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Imperfection, the one where 7 of 9 has a medical crisis, but it's nothing that a little teamwork and Borg tech can't solve. I'll be back with trivia in just a moment, right after Norman tells all of you how to reach us.
We would love to hear from all of you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and on Instagram and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help your favorite podcasts is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or your preferred podcast platform. And remember, your comments could be used on the show. And now, here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
Okay, I will try to make this as perfect as I can. We have a story by Andre Bormanis, and it's always nice to see science consultant turned story editor and writer Andre's name in the credits. Now, most recently, we discussed his episode Riddles, and he'll be back throughout Season 7 of Voyager before making the jump over to Enterprise. The teleplay is credited to Charlton Eastlake and Robert Doherty. Now, we've seen Robert's name a lot, like recently when we discussed another of his Voyager teleplays for Lifeline. Charlton is a new name for us, though, and this is his only Trek credit. He's no stranger to science fiction, though. His name turns up in credits from Sequest DSV to Earth Final Conflict to Farscape to The Outer Limits. This was directed by David Livingston, and of course, it's always nice to see friend of the show, David, in the credits. We most recently discussed his work when we covered The Haunting of Deck 12, and we're getting down to the end of his credits on Voyager. Just 2 more to go here until he jumps over to Enterprise. And if you missed our conversation with David covering a whole range of inside topics about his time with the franchise, check out our recent supplemental episode number 80. We do have a production note. I will admit it, Norman, I'm going to speak for you just as freely as I will speak for me. We are probably going to be tripped up on all kinds, well, I'm going to say at least 2 continuity errors in this episode, but partly that is for good reason. This episode was number 4 shot for Season 7, but it aired as Episode 2, so bear with us. We'll be just as surprised by those errors here as audiences were back in the year 2000. Let's meet our guest stars. On the Borg cube, Janeway and crew run into some aliens who have claimed salvage rights to the debris. They are played by Stan Clayton, stunt performer Elle Alexander, and their lead, the talkative one, is Michael McFall. Now, Michael had a small role in Forrest Gump, and he later had a recurring role on LA Heat. And while this is his only Trek appearance on TV, he provided his voice talent for 2 Star Trek video games the same year that this episode premiered. All of our remaining Borg kids are back until 3 of them are not. Unfortunately, with this episode, we say goodbye to Mazadi, Azan, and Rebbe, which means saying goodbye to their respective actors, Marky McLean, Kurt Wetherill, and Cody Wetherill. The kids are beamed away under the care of a Wazanti woman played by Debbie Grattan. Debbie has an extensive background in live theater, and in addition to her TV appearances, has also featured in dozens of commercials and also provided her voice for video games and animated projects. So far, this is her only Trek credit.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Whatever you do, don't stick anything up your nodes. You can't just get new nodes. Or can you?
Prologue. For many aboard Voyager, the journey ends as we bid farewell to the twins, Zahn and Rebbe. A Wasanti ship arrives to return them to their people, and Mazzotti chooses to join them. She parts from Icheb with a stoic farewell, but leaves Seven with a distinctly human hug, echoed by the twins. After the Wasanti ship departs, Seven instructs Icheb to deactivate the now empty Borg alcoves. Icheb reluctantly agrees, but when he tries to explain his reaction, he notices a tear rolling down Seven's cheek. She brushes it off, claiming her ocular implant is malfunctioning. Act 1. Seven reports to sickbay, where the doctor concludes that the tears she shed was the result of a severe emotional response to the children's departure. Seven rejects the diagnosis, claiming full control of her emotions. The doctor challenges her and threatens to examine her alcove's biometric data. Seven relents, admitting to recent headaches. She convinces him to keep her condition confidential, especially from the captain, in exchange for a promise to be more forthcoming about her health. Later in Astrometrics, Icheb is reviewing a Starfleet Academy entrance form but quickly switches the screen when Seven enters. He asks for her and the crew's support in taking the exam, hoping for more meaningful duties. Seven humors the request and agrees to inform Captain Janeway. When a convulsion ripples through her hand, she abruptly excuses herself. Back in Cargo Bay 2, the computer fails to initiate her regeneration cycle, reporting that her cortical node is malfunctioning and she is no longer compatible with the alcove. Later, in the mess hall, Neelix finds Seven testing nutritional supplements to manage her condition. Just as he offers to cook her a proper meal, she collapses and begins convulsing as cybernetic lesions form on her face. Act 2. Seven wakes in sickbay to find Janeway and the doctor at her side. The doctor gently explains that her condition is more serious than expected. Her cortical node, which stabilizes her vital Borg implants, is failing. Seven insists her physiology will adapt, but the doctor makes it clear that her most essential implants will fail regardless. Once the doctor is excused, Janeway and Seven discuss what to do next. Seven notes that damaged drones were typically discarded and replaced, prompting Janeway to form a plan. She proposes salvaging a functional cortical node from a dead Borg drone and orders Harry to return to a nearby Borg cube debris field. Though Chakotay and Tuvok express concerns about Janeway's risky away mission, Tom volunteers to pilot the Delta Flyer, and Tuvok offers to accompany Janeway. She agrees not to go it alone. On the way to the shuttle bay, Janeway is stopped by Icheb, puzzled as to why Seven didn't tell her about his Starfleet exam request. Janeway reveals that Seven is gravely ill. Icheb offers to help, but she refuses, citing the risk. Undeterred, Icheb visits Seven in sickbay only for her to lash out. The doctor pulls him aside, explaining that patients often displace their fear and frustration onto those they care about. Giving her space is the kindest support he can offer. In the debris field, the Delta Flyer locks onto a dense cluster of approximately, or exactly, 37 drones. Janeway and Tuvok beam aboard a wrecked cube and retrieve a cortical node from a dead drone. Suddenly, Tom reports an unidentified ship nearby. 3 humanoids beam in, and before Janeway and Tuvok can escape, they're surrounded by an alien raiding party. Act 3. 3 hostile aliens inform Janeway that the salvage, including the cortical node, belongs to them. She briefly gains the upper hand, threatening one with a laser scalpel, but he quickly turns the tables. Just as they open fire, Tom beams Janeway and Tuvok safely back to the Delta Flyer. In sickbay, Neelix finds Seven up and working. He offers her flowers and invites her to play Caddiscot, but she's uninterested. With some clever reverse psychology, Neelix and the doctor manage to change her mind. Later, the doctor, assisted by Tom and the captain, attempts to implant the recovered node. Despite flawless execution, the procedure fails for the 12th time in simulation. In a tense exchange, Janeway confides that she's willing to do whatever it takes. The doctor realizes what she means: harvesting a node from a living drone. A life for a life? Neelix's brief distraction gives way to grim reality when the doctor tells Seven the procedure still won't work. She quietly absorbs the news and asks to continue working. Janeway agrees, provided she stays in sickbay. When Icheb arrives with her materials, Seven is gone. He activates the doctor, who reveals she deactivated him. The computer claims she's still in sickbay until they spot her comm badge on the table. In engineering, Seven is working when B'Elanna finds her. Seven asks if she believes in Stovallcor. B'Elanna offers an explanation and Seven confesses her fear. Without the collective, she'll be forgotten. B'Elanna assures her that she's made a lasting impact and will be remembered. The doctor arrives and insists Seven return. She agrees on the condition that she remains useful and wears a cortical monitor. In Astrometrics, Icheb confronts her about the Starfleet exam already approved by Janeway and others. She accuses him of relying too much on others. He counters that she stopped fighting, even as others are still fighting for her. Act 4. After confirming what he suspected through a detailed review of medical scans and astrometrics, Icheb bursts into sickbay and, without pretense, tells the doctor how to save Seven by using his own cortical node, the node of a living former drone, not a dead one. The doctor tries to dissuade him, insisting that despite Icheb's noble intentions, this would be an act of suicide, not bravery. But Icheb explains that he can survive the procedure. His data shows an 86.9% chance of success. All he asks is that the doctor consider his proposal and not dismiss it because of his age or perceived naivete. Back in Astrometrics, Seven is staring wistfully at the Grand Canyon when Janeway arrives. Seven confronts her with a list of crew members lost since Voyager's arrival in the Delta Quadrant. Janeway misinterprets the point, assuming Seven is highlighting her losses. Instead, Seven emphasizes that Janeway has always found a way to emotionally distance herself from those losses, but won't be able to do so when it comes to her death. Janeway is taken aback by what she sees as arrogance, but Seven clarifies. She's grateful for Janeway's encouragement, her investment in Seven's growth, and the past she's helped forge towards humanity. But Seven fears her death will ultimately prove she failed to live up to Janeway's expectations. Janeway strongly disagrees, insisting that what she would grieve most is the loss of a crew member and a friend. Before they can continue, the doctor summons them both to sickbay. When Janeway, Seven, and Icheb are together, the doctor explains Icheb's plan. While he doesn't endorse it, he cannot deny that Icheb's data is sound. Seven immediately refuses any procedure that risks harming Icheb, and Janeway supports her decision. Later, the doctor asks Seven if there's anything she'd like. "Are you offering me a last meal?" she replies. Gallows humor, perhaps to ease the tension. Just then, Icheb summons the doctor and the captain to Cargo Bay 2. When they arrive, they find him barely standing in his alcove, convulsing. He reveals he has already disconnected his cortical node to save Seven, believing this was the only way to prove he was right. Act 5. After being transported directly to sickbay, both Icheb and Seven refuse to accept the use of Icheb's working cortical node. Amid the chaos, the doctor declares that someone is going to use the node before it destabilizes and ends up saving no one. Icheb insists the doctor monitor his vital signs, proving that his data is accurate. His implants are beginning to stabilize and adapt without the cortical node. With the doctor now on board, Icheb turns his focus to Seven. Despite her continued refusal and his clear display of care, he rightfully points out her hypocrisy. She's the one who always keeps people at a distance, who shies away from real connection. What he is doing, he says, is what he's learned from being on Voyager, that they help each other whenever they can. Seven finally accepts the inevitable and agrees to undergo the procedure. After 6 days, she is fully regenerated and recovered, her Borg implants having successfully integrated Icheb's cortical node. However, Icheb is still recuperating. As Seven watches over him, she offers to help him prepare for the Starfleet Academy exam through a rigorous and grueling schedule, of course. Staring back at her with concern, Icheb sees a tear roll down her cheek. This time, when the doctor examines her, he assures Icheb that her ocular implant is functioning perfectly. The end.
All right, Norman, nicely done on the recap there. And they waste no time in the teaser section. We're just going to get rid of the kids right at the top of the show. And we're going to do without letting the twins talk. I have to admit, though, I'm going to miss Mizotti. I think she had some real potential for growth on this show, so it's too bad that we lose her.
Yeah, I was watching like the reaction for Seven's goodbyes, and when Mazzotti and the twins hugged her goodbye, I was just watching Jerry's specific facial reactions, and she was making me kind of tear up a little bit too. She's really, really good at those subtleties. She's
so in the moment, and just without any dialogue, she just gets the moment.
Also, what was making me tear up a little bit, Icheb's shirt design. No, I'm just kidding. But I did want to point out, it was really interesting watching him walk around with this specific pattern of shirt, because it looked like 2 Borg cubes were like printed on the fabric. And I'm wondering if it's like a conscious decision to kind of like keep him looking somewhat Borg-ish.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting. See, I just always look at it as like, what upholstery did they find to make a costume out of this week? But I like that thematic connection that you're making there. Interesting. We introduced this idea of crying as a programmed malfunction. And I don't know that I have, honestly, too much more to say about that, but it's interesting phrasing, because of course they have to put it in a way that 7 of 9 would express it. But honestly, if you think about it, that is part of our genetic, quote, programming, to have that reaction. And that is also part of our cultural programming, that is how we respond to things. So she's not totally off base, but she is phrasing it in a way that makes sense for her,
I love kind of like the close-up on Icheb with his quick, like lightning fast button presses to change his screen from the Starfleet exam to like his work. Because it reminds me of, like when you're at work, a lot of people are at work, like, if they're on their downtime or just like hiding behind a computer, they're playing solitaire or like Minesweeper, quote unquote solitaire, right? And then someone's going to walk by and they know they have like the escape button where they can go right back to their desktop.
Yeah. There was some game, I can't remember if it was Snood or something else, that there was a command key and it would just bring up a generic-looking spreadsheet.
Wasn't it Myst?
Maybe it was Myst. I can't remember. Maybe other games built that in, Yeah. I'm very intrigued by this idea of Icheb joining Starfleet Academy. I mean, obviously he's got some free time right now and time before that would eventually become a reality for him, so why not? But then you have to wonder, how does Starfleet feel about admitting a former Borg?
It's interesting that Seven kind of pushes back on Icheb's desire to work on the bridge, citing that he doesn't have a bridge experience, he doesn't have Starfleet training, but neither does she.
Yeah, right.
And she's on the bridge. So it's weird, like this whole, is she being kind of like, you're too young, Icheb, type of hovering?
Well, I think there's a lot of the mother and child dynamic throughout this episode for sure. But, maybe there is something to him being less mature. We really don't know everything that happened on his homeworld as he was programmed to be this bioweapon. And we also don't know how advanced his Borg technology is, which we get a little taste of it here. We get an idea of how much more advanced she is because she had been assimilated for so much longer. So maybe she can absorb or assimilate Starfleet info better than he can.
Interesting.
But I also, there's just the kind of knee-jerk reaction to him and that knee-jerk protection of him, too. And by the way, it seems like when Seven goes into her regeneration chamber and the computer says, well, you couldn't regenerate because of a malfunction in cortical node, that seems like the kind of thing that regeneration should fix.
Right.
So, that just seems like bad planning all around.
Yeah, blame the alcoves, right?
Yeah, right.
When Seven collapses in front of Neelix and the kind of the lesion opens up on her cheek, first of all, the CGI, this and in other places in this episode, is really, really well done.
Yeah.
And her seizures were very convincing.
Yeah.
So really, there's nothing that Jerry isn't good at.
Yeah, she played it exactly right. And by the way, we do get those places that open up where the implants are kind of breaking through, and it's a cool and interesting looking effect on her. However, you do have to notice that whenever 7 of 9 is ill or damaged or whatever, it's just her and then a little bit of hair out of place. Like that's, they should have made an action figure like that where it's 7 but just with a little bit of hair out of place, and then you know
That should have
something's
been,
wrong. Yeah.
That should have been like one of those exclusives that's really hard to find, like one out of every 13
Right.
cases or something.
Exactly.
The doctor says to Seven, "I'm afraid it's a result of that glitch found in your cortical node. Apparently it's more serious than we thought." And then Seven says the node is destabilizing. So when I saw that kind of crystallized the episode a lot for me. It kind of triggered me a little bit, based on a similar type of discussion that I had with my doctor almost a year to the date of this episode, or a little bit past a year. Yeah.
Wow.
To the date of this episode.
I can imagine. God. Now, there is this bit where the doctor says something about how he had removed, minor implants from Seven, and that's how she's been able to get along all this time. But as I recall, back when we met Seven during Scorpion, she was pretty much all machine. you know?
She looked like it, for sure.
Yeah. So it wasn't just minor implants, but I guess when you have the few major ones that do a lot of work, like the cortical node, okay, well, there's no getting around that. And again, like her, I thought the stuff was supposed to repair itself. I thought that was the whole bit is, okay, well, she's got nanoprobes. You need to program the nanoprobes. Hey, fix this. And then they do it. You know?
Yeah. There's that adage, acting is about reacting.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in this episode watching a lot of people react to Jerry's acting or Seven's character.
Yep.
And just really kind of pay attention to, and especially in the scene where, Seven understands that, if the core destabilizes, then she'll die.
Yeah.
You see Janeway, react a certain way. You see the doctor react a certain way. It's really incredible. The acting is very, very good in this episode.
Especially in these early parts of the episode where she is trying to keep it in and be strong and be herself. And the others around her are reacting, but they are also trying not to overreact. And it's great. It's so real every step of the way. All right. Now, this is a continuity thing, but I watched this, and the first thing I thought was, oh, my God, we're chasing another Borg cube, and it's only the second episode. We just came from an episode where we're chasing a Borg cube, and we just put the Delta Flyer back together. Could we not have come up with some other way to do this? But yeah, so we're back there. And I understand we're out of continuity here, but yeah. And then I imagine you picked this up as well. We got 37 drones, not 47 drones.
Yes, I wanted it to be 47, but I also thought it was really funny when Tuvok said approximately 37 drones, and then Tom said, 37 doesn't sound approximate to me.
That is a great
line.
It
literally is specific, 37 drones, right?
Yeah, that is a great line. And you have to wonder, okay, what is that percentage that you're off?
Right. I mean, it's like a body part is 37.29% or something.
Right, exactly. You can't account for that arm. I guess that's it, Interesting bit when Janeway is over that drone corpse. And why does she save that little bit of flesh in the box that she's got her equipment in? That was just weird. She cuts that away and puts that down. Are you going to put that back? Because I don't think you are. Very cool, though, the cortical node. It's a glow stick, first of all. And second of all, I did wonder, shouldn't the doctor or Tom have been doing this since, after all, Tom is a medical professional. Right. So seems like they could have done that, not Janeway. Yeah.
I have a theory about that bit of flesh. I hear that it's a type of currency with certain Ferengi named Goldmember.
There we go. Yes.
Right? Yeah. So imagine Goldmember as a Ferengi. And
I love it.
You know what we're talking about.
Yep.
So that cortical node. So when... I'm sorry for bringing this up again.
Okay.
But in Unimatrix Zero, when Janeway, Tuvok, and B'Elanna were assimilated, did they also receive those cortical nodes in their brains?
Right. Because they just did that.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's not because Icheb had one. I assume the 3 Borg children have them also.
Yeah.
And then the dead drone has one. Seven has one. So it sounds like standard, forgive the term, standard operating procedure software for Borg drones. I'm just wondering if they didn't get those in Unimatrix Zero.
I guess they did, and I guess they just pushed away all the fleshy parts of the brain to just put it in there, and it's okay if you take it out. It'll grow back, right?
Right.
So after we had that encounter with these aliens who were never named, pretty nice fly-through effects with the chase, with the who are these guys? Because I don't know.
They're just a salvage raiding party.
Sure, that's what they do. Yeah.
I think it was nice seeing Tom actually assisting the Doctor as per his duties.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about kind of like this 24th century medical technology. Do people really need to be, especially Seven, unclothed during brain surgery?
I would say where it's just a very specific part of surgery in a very specific place. Yeah. I don't know. Now, I do like seeing Seven doing all this busy work to occupy herself. And I like this moment of Neelix coming in to try to cheer her up. And I love the little bit of reverse psychology about playing Kadis-Kot. Very well played, Doctor. Mm-hmm. Nicely done. And I, like everybody else, I hope, fooled the first time by the simulation of the procedure. I loved that.
Oh, I bit that hard. I bit that hook hard. Yeah. It was really, really good. It tricked me for sure. Yeah. Watching Seven throw herself into work, quote unquote, throwing herself into work. It's a very human response. Yeah. To a diagnosis. I'm going to call them techno lesions.
Oh, that's a good band name. Yeah.
I think so too, right? Somewhere in the Daft Punk type of flavor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the makeup effects in those lesions, you can see kind of like the highlight of the skin. So you can see the layer on top of the actual technology. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Mm-hmm. So the computer can't find the only female Borg on the ship without her communicator?
There's a lot of metal.
I guess so.
A lot of electronic parts.
She must have confused her for a bulkhead or something.
I guess so. When Seven leaves, we then have this really excellent discussion about the afterlife between B'Elanna and Seven. And I am just so glad that we finally get a scene between these two that has depth, that is not bickering, that is not B'Elanna taking cheap shots. I think there's more to discuss there, but so good.
I mean, it definitely passes the Bechdel test.
Yes.
In this particular context. I think that this is one of Roxanne's best acted scenes on the series.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best written scenes for B'Elanna as a character. I think both Roxanne and Jerry, they just acted so remarkably well in this scene.
And by the way, informed a little bit by B'Elanna's experience with the afterlife, or her imaginings of that afterlife, however you want to parse that. But yeah, we had some pretty intense stuff with B'Elanna in the last season, written by Ron Moore. And then that scene immediately followed by a great scene with Seven and Icheb. Just back to back, you have these fantastic, truly powerful acting moments. And then, of course, there will be a lot to say about choices made in this episode, but this offer from Icheb, it sounded an awful lot like a voluntary organ transplant, which is not, there are people who we know, I'm sure in your personal life and friends of the show, who have done that for other people in their family, and none of that is ever to be taken lightly. But I like the way they struggled with this in the episode, but I also like the appeal to logic in the episode. So I may be jumping ahead, but yeah.
Well, it's a great scene, and I love how Icheb stresses the 0.9% to the Doctor, because the Doctor says, it's only an 87.9%, of success rate. So I love that it's specific and accurate. Yeah. Like Tom's reaction to the 37 not being approximate but accurate. And I'm wondering if these are the kind of details that Andre Bormanis, knowing what we know about him, he added specifically into his scripts.
Oh, that is a good question. Yeah, that could be.
It was very particular, in terms of punctuation for those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And by the way, that scene, it reminded me of a podcast that I listened to not that long ago. And I apologize because I listened to so much that I'm not sure if it was in Skeptic's Guide to the Universe or something else. But they were proposing this idea that when you're weighing out a medical procedure, kind of given a hypothetical, okay, if you had a procedure that would be 99%, it would be 100% effective, but in 99% of the cases. And in one of those cases, you are condemning the patient to a horrible, painful death. Okay. But you have another procedure that is effective, say 90 to 99% effective in about 80%, maybe upwards of 90% of your patients. And in the others, it doesn't do anything. You know, what ethically, which one do you side with? And ethically, that answer will be, well, we go with the one that actually has the lower success rate, but does not then condemn somebody, even that 1%, to a horrible fate. So interesting to be faced with this here, where you have this potential risky thing, as hard as they try in that holodeck simulation. Oh, if we only get it right, it'll be absolutely effective and everybody is fine. But it won't, because there is that split second where it just won't work. And here's Icheb coming along with something that has a nearly 90% success rate. Yes. So, I think ethically you have to go there, but then that's what this whole episode is about. Yep.
I love how he's standing his ground, with his data and the specifics of the data, and to prove that this is all based on science and not emotion, and not a young person choosing a fate that, he doesn't deserve over, science.
Yeah.
Because he was being emotional about it.
Yeah. Yep. 2 shout outs back to back. We get a shout out to Bloomington, Indiana, and we get a shout out to Lindsay Ballard.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Welcome back to Star Trek canon, Lindsay Ballard. Love that.
Mm-hmm. The scene where Seven says Janeway won't accept her death because Seven has failed Janeway's attempts into making her more human. So I thought too that, wow, are the writers taking a shot at Janeway's arc here? But there's a lot of subtext here. There's a lot underneath the surface. I think it would take us several podcasts just to digest and dissect that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remark that I think this is possibly one of, if not the best acted scenes between Kate and Jerry's characters so far.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think you're wrong. That it was strong. It was strong writing to begin with. Mm-hmm. And they played every layer of subtext and interpretation within that scene. Yep. So, excellent stuff. You pointed it out in your recap, a little gallows humor about last meal.
Yeah. A nice bit of humor, even though it's not humor,
Yeah. And we get another humorous line with the doctor saying persistence is futile.
That was great.
Wonderful stuff. And I love kind of the bold, heroic move from Icheb. It's like, look, if you're not listening to me, if you're not taking me seriously, I'm going to do this anyway. Right. Now, look, that is not applicable to all situations. That is not applicable to all moments, But in this case, I think for dramatic effect, it was the correct move. We do have this line saying to Janeway, Captain, he's just a child. I mean, there is a little bit of a problem here that Icheb does play older than I think he's supposed to be. But then in reality, you need an actor who could work a full day on set. So there's a little bit of a problem. I always think of Icheb, like, in theory, should be about 16.
That's what I was thinking, 15 or 16.
Yeah. And he doesn't, he plays older because, the actor was older. But, yeah.
His soliloquy, though, at the end, isn't that what people on the ship do, help each other?
Yeah.
I nearly applauded.
Yeah.
At my screen during that scene. I think that it was fantastically written and acted. And I'm going to say my reaction to that is rare for Star Trek episodes that I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. Oh, and Tom back in there helping. Look, he's a good little helper, like he knows what he's doing, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nice to see Tom. And wearing a wedding ring? What?
That was interesting, huh?
Yeah, another bit of continuity issue. All right. I didn't mention it before, but I really like the effects for the cortical implant because they are just smooth as glass. Apparently no surgical scrub needed if you're going into somebody's brain, but
apparently not.
With a combination of a practical and a CG effect. Oh, just super well done in this episode.
But again, it's such a good point that you make. They basically do surgery on their brain with this cortical node. There are no scrubs involved.
Yep.
We have to assume that there's some type of disinfectant biofilter field, right?
I know.
In place. So why do they have to declothe the patients?
I know. And by the way, you have Janeway and Tom there with no masks on, nothing. You don't need a mask for the doctor, but it's just everything's fine. You know, I do hope that they kept that old cortical node so they can study it. It just seems like a kind of thing you might need to use again in the future. And by the way, nice job getting that little skin plug to grow back. I guess that's what a dermal regenerator is for. And man, in an episode full of great moments, what a lovely moment again for Seven. I mean, look, for fear of skipping ahead to my closing statements on this episode, for a scene that was written in kind of the most obvious way possible, sometimes you need that bonk bonk on the head emotional moment, and it's only a talented actor then who can really deliver it. And boy, does she. We'll get right back to Imperfection after a quick reminder about how you can win an amazing Star Trek prop replica from Factory Entertainment.
Hey, Mission Log listeners, just a quick reminder that time is running out to enter our incredible Star Trek giveaway thanks to our friends at Factory Entertainment.
That's right. At the top of the prize list is the Borg Queen Skull Signature Edition prop replica, a museum-quality piece recreated directly from the surviving screen-used prop in the CBS archive.
It's cast from heavyweight resin, finished in electroplated chrome, hand-weathered to match the battle damage from First Contact, and yes, it even lights up with a fade-out effect that mimics the Queen's cinematic demise. This is the crown jewel of any Star Trek collection.
And we've got 2 runner-up prizes, too. Each winner gets a hand phaser bottle opener from either TOS or TNG, functional, faithful, and just plain fun.
Entering is totally free, and you can boost your chances by completing multiple entry actions. The link is right there in the show notes. Whatever app you're listening on, just scroll down and click.
This is your moment. Hit that link, enter the giveaway, and you just might end up with a little piece of the collective on your shelf.
But don't wait. The Queen's not known for her patience. And neither is our deadline.
Is this the Delta Flyer 2, or is it the Delta Flyer Beta? Better go with a number. I already can't tell if it's a spaceship or a sorority.
So Norman, way back in the early days of Mission Log, I believe it was in the Corbomite maneuver, there was this idea floated that the crew were going through the 5 stages of grief. Now, here's the thing, the Kubler-Ross concept of these stages of grief, in the years since that has come out, because I believe that originally was posited in the 60s, I might be wrong on that. I think modern psychology sort of looks at that and says, well, they aren't exactly lined up. They don't always express the same way in people, and people kind of jump around with these different feelings. But those are all valid reactions to understand and to grapple with, to put a name on them. And I thought about that similarly in looking at this episode. As we're focused so much on Seven's reaction to what's going on here, not to mention the reactions of the people around her who are dealing with it. But I took a step back from it and I thought, okay, well, look, we know that 7 of 9 is not going to be killed off. She is a wildly popular character at the beginning of this season. We're not just going to kill her off. But what we do get to do is follow her on this emotional journey, faced with something that she thinks and everybody else around her thinks is terminal. And they're going to go to every heroic effort they can to save her, to come up with any novel procedure to bring her back. But I was looking at all these emotional beats that she has throughout, and sometimes all within the same scene. There is denial, and she had been through levels of denial by not sharing her concerns early on with the doctor. There is this level of embarrassment because she holds herself to this much higher standard of perfection. See also the title of the episode, right? There is anger. There is this kind of disorientation that she experiences, not knowing what to do with herself. There is hopelessness. There's even the humor that we reference, a little later in the episode, this kind of gallows humor about a last meal. And all of it is so wonderful to watch because it is so utterly human. And I kept wondering, would a show like Voyager allow our other characters to go through that? Or is it only because we have a part human, part Borg character who has this completely outsider position that we finally get to do this? Because, you think about it, Harry Kim has died twice. All we've gotten is this kind of a nod to that once when Janeway said, "Oh, you should take some time off."
Yeah, right.
But we never actually got to go through those steps with him. Now, there is another character who we've gotten to go through some of this with, and that is Neelix, and I will come back to that as well. But it seems like we only allow ourselves to have these deeply human moments with our non-human characters. I love, by the way, I look, this is one of those episodes where I just kept writing down so many good lines of dialogue. And one of those that the doctor expresses to Icheb, trying to explain what Seven is going through. He says that she is frustrated to be confined and embarrassed to be vulnerable. Oh, my God, it just hits you right in the heart, because...
Right, and then he follows it up with, we have to give her dignity.
Yes, yeah. Stated so well to try to explain the layers of complexity to somebody who doesn't get it, who emotionally doesn't get it. I just thought these were wonderful moments. Yeah,
I think with a character like Seven or with a non-human character, I think it actually fits well with, the model of that particular character being the character that connects with the audience because they're the outsider character. Again, see Spock, see Data, see Odo, now see Seven of Nine and the Doctor. The two characters acting more so in this series than any other. And what I think why it's so impactful with Seven, first of all, because of Jerry's acting. Let's just put that out there. Not to say that the other actors couldn't do it, but I think that she just elevates the writing just a little bit more than pretty much any of the other characters would have done.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I'm probably going to get all the details for that. But I think also we get to see what she will potentially lose when she's gone. And I think that that's the whole issue with the conversation with B'Elanna. Like, everything that I am as an individual when I am gone is also gone.
Yeah.
And she doesn't understand the concept of what you leave behind.
Yeah.
To steal a little bit from Deep Space Nine's,
Fair.
thunder. But because she already said goodbye and was heartbroken with the 3 Borg children earlier, then the potential of losing Icheb with this procedure, she doesn't... And I want to say this very respectfully for people that have gone through this as I've gone through this. When you are faced with a situation where the outcome is completely unfavorable, I'm trying to sanitize this as much as I can. You go through these periods where you just want to be left alone so that the vortex of what's happening to you emotionally and physically doesn't drag down anybody else. That's that's our response as the patient. We just want everyone to not suffer as we suffer, as we are suffering through it. Now, I'm going to get to that later on in the end of the episode, but I think that that's where Seven is. Like, she lashes out emotionally pretty much at everybody because it's easier to drive people away and not have them be concerned over you than it is for them to share in the pain that you are giving them. Yeah. Because you are ill.
Look, I thought of you while I was watching this episode, and thank God you have recovered in such a remarkable way. I am so grateful for your team, your doctors, for Carol, for everybody who fought for you and fought with you, because you were there fighting as well. That was a team effort, right? And I can't put myself in your shoes, but I thought about that sort of emotional journey. And I there are lines in here that resonated with me because I think they resonated with you, and I think they resonated with people who I knew who had terminal diagnoses. Seven has this line. She says, "What I want is to be useful." And I thought, my God, that just, it says so much, because it says so much about her as a character, but it also says so much about what you just described, which is when you're faced with something that upends your life, that also has so many unknowable aspects to it, right? Then you grasp for any sense of normalcy. And part of that is allowing the people around you to have some normalcy. Because if all they're doing is, upending their lives, well, it just magnifies what you're going through as well. So I understand that as a reaction. Yeah.
There's something, and it's very human, which is really interesting with a character like Seven, because, she's learning about the humanity of, the Voyager crew, something that, Icheb highlights later on in his soliloquy. And I think that it's an interesting thing that they focus on accepting being a burden to the crew. And when you are diagnosed, or when you have somebody you love or know someone, or it's, been diagnosed for you personally, the one thing that you don't want to have happen is for you to be an actual burden to people.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not they choose to accept said burden, with thinking about you 24/7, making sure that you're getting taken care of, because that is taxing on even the most stalwart of caregivers.
Yeah.
And when you see them get burdened and stressed because they are taking care of you, and I say this, in what happened to me as well. I mean, Carol was a saint, but she's also human. And there were times when that frustration came through. And you don't want that for people. You don't want what happened to you happen to them by extension. So that's something that I found really well told in this episode, that Seven's like, it is easier for me to put up these walls so that I don't have to let people carry my burden with me.
Yeah.
Right? I can choose to fight, or I could choose to surrender, but it's going to be on me, and I'm going to leave everyone else out of it.
Let me present the other side, though, because the other side is these people who care, who say, I want that burden. Like that is part of my, it's part of my duty. It's part of my friendship. It's part of my family, whether it's, literal or found family. That is part of who I am, is to take on some of that burden when the other person can't take it on themselves. And I hear, when I went back home a couple of years ago to take care of my dad, 99% of the time, it was my honor to be there to do that by choice and to help in any way I possibly could. And that 1% of the time that I felt frustrated and said or did things that I might regret, I also remind myself that those are human reactions too. You know,
absolutely.
You can't always be 100% the thing that somebody needs. You know,
you can easily be 87.9%.
And thank goodness we've got a number on it. You know,
yeah. Don't forget the 0.9.
Yeah, there's so many interesting real world parallels here, and there is this moment of offered sacrifice that Icheb has that he's taking even beyond what the Doctor or Janeway or anybody else does. He's saying, take a part of me. It is that much more important to help her. And I did wonder a bit, what does that mean for him long term? Is he less of himself somehow because this part of him is missing? Now, we were told in the hand-waving Star Trek universe way that he'll be okay, his body will recover. But you also wonder, is this a thing that he would eventually need because he is also partly Borg?
But think about it this way, and this is the way that I saw it. It's a great question. I'm glad you brought this up. It is their goal, at least what he's learning from Voyager, by osmosis or, being there presently, on the ship, and also what he's learning from Seven, to be more human. The ability to sacrifice for others.
Yeah.
Regardless of belief system, regardless of, politics, but being able to definitively choose to sacrifice something important in order to save another in some way, shape, or form is the essence of being human.
Yeah.
That is what humanity is supposed to be about. And being able to tap into that as I don't want to steal too much thunder of, later on in the show, but a moral meaning or message. This is what Icheb is saying. I thought you are all supposed to help each other. This is what you do on the ship, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? So him wanting to do that, that's his honor at stake. That's his humanity development.
And I love that because it means that Icheb has learned really fast. And he has this line. He says, if Seven can refuse treatment, so can I. It speaks to his learning what's at stake. It speaks to his understanding of this mutual level of help and sacrifice. Also, I kind of alluded to it earlier, this interesting test in medical ethics. Who has the right of way here? Who gets to say, I refuse treatment? No, I refuse treatment because I am refusing your refusal of treatment. So a great moment there, I think, handled very well.
I mean, I love the Doctor's point. If no one uses it, both of you die, potentially. Yeah. But this goes back to what you were saying about the treatment. Yeah. Icheb, specifically with proven data, has an 87.9% chance of his organs accepting the fact that the cortical node is gone, allowing his body to adapt to that particular absence. If Seven doesn't get the cortical node, she is 100% going to die.
Yeah.
So I think that the Doctor has to choose. I either save one life and an 87.9% chance of saving another, or having a 100% chance of saving no one.
He's got the trolley.
I think the Doctor has to make
he's got the trolley problem. He really does.
Mm-hmm. So the Doctor has to make a choice based on Icheb making a choice, and Icheb is making a very adult decision here. Again, he is acting scientifically and responsibly and not emotionally, but up until that point, when he challenges basically Janeway, the Doctor, and Seven, saying that, aren't you here and you're supposed to help each other? The entirety of this episode, everyone is treating him like a child. And I'm wondering, is Seven subconsciously keeping Icheb from quote unquote growing up too quickly? Right? Mm-hmm. Because she has relationships with these Borg children, and of course 3 out of the 4 of them, they seem like children. They're smaller, they are of age, around 9 or 10. Icheb is 16, 17, something like that. We were talking about that before. She had a relationship with Mazadi that was very special. She had a very special relationship with the twins that also was very special. But Icheb's the only one left now, right? And I'm wondering if she's treating him in a way that not only she's reacting to him specifically because she's ill, But when he brings up the Starfleet exam, it almost feels like when you bring that up, like, I want to take my driver's license test to your parents, or I want to go to college, or I want to get a job. They're like, yeah. They're going to like look there. Sometimes, like my dad would like, he's reading a paper. Probably your dad did the same thing. And he's like, hey, Dad, I want to do this. And he's like, yeah. Talk to your mom.
Right.
you know? And it's kind of like that, right? Yeah. There's just something real kind of dismissive, even if it's not purposeful, but there was something dismissive about Icheb's genuine desire to become not only more human, but more adult in his responsibilities and in his life. And him doing what he did, disconnecting his cortical node. I mean, I know that it was extreme, but he's like, you know what? There's no one they're going to take me seriously if I don't do something that, well, it's put up or shut up. It's, S or get off the pot time, right? You want to see me as an adult? Here's an adult decision. Now it's your turn. What are you going to do with it? Right. So I don't know. How did you feel about that?
I love how this episode drives home this parent-child relationship between Seven and Icheb. And on the one hand, she is dismissing him, like, okay, maybe the Starfleet Academy thing. Yeah, sure, we're still 30,000 light years away. I've got other things on my mind, which she does, legitimately. But I also... there's this other moment that I think kind of drives home the rest of that too, which is, remember, Seven basically says her goodbye to Icheb. And this is a moment where she is a parent telling a child who is maybe emotionally immature here. We don't know his full story. She's telling this child that she will eventually die. And it is a very vulnerable human moment for her. It's also logical. She has to do this. But this is where her head is. This is where she's going to connect with him. The Starfleet Academy thing, maybe it's too far beyond the scope of what she can deal with right now, because she's just got to get through the next day and then the next day after that, and hopefully this procedure will work, but it may not. And she's prepared herself for the reality that it may not. So the Academy idea might just be... she hopes for the best. Thank goodness we have that scene at the end where, they have this lovely moment to reinforce that she is going to help him through to do that. But I think in the moment, she is so thoroughly distracted by everything else, she can't take it seriously. But then the scene that she does take seriously is essentially letting him know, like, I'm going to be gone at some point. It's going to be a lot sooner, as she thinks, than she would like. But that's that was ultimately such a human moment for both of them. But it felt like a parent saying that almost to a 6 or 7 year old. Somebody who is so underdeveloped, but very much like Seven, has knowledge but without experience.
Probably a good thing the younger Borg kids left when they did. Say, you aren't using your nodes for anything, are you?
All right, well, as best as our imperfect human brains can tackle it, we have had a nice discussion about Imperfection, second episode in Voyager's final season. We're in the home stretch, Norman.
Right.
Can't believe it. Yeah. But an episode that I think from the beginning we kept saying, oh, we're going to get there because there's all this heavy stuff. Oh, we're going to talk about this too. This episode is just chock full of great discussion points and great ideas. Yeah. But before we get to those and leave it open to our audience to tell us what they thought, Imperfection, does the episode hold up?
When I usually start with, in all honesty...
Red alert.
Usually I can feel listeners out there right about this time kind of bristle with what I have to say after that, after those words. Yeah. So please bear with me on this one. Does this episode hold up? Does it stand the test of time? Well, in all honesty, I think this is one of the best episodes of Voyager I've seen so far.
Wow.
It easily makes my top 10 and perhaps even my top 5.
Ooh.
Now, why, you may ask? Well, it's kind of complicated. I mean, it comes down to a lot of reasons, but very 2 specific reasons, and I'll address in a little bit. Like most Voyager episodes, like at this late stage in the game, i.e. season 6, late season 6, and then now season 7, we've said this before, we don't really have a problem with the production, right?
Yeah.
The episode is solidly directed by David Livingston, but we've come to know that, right?
Yeah.
Expertly acted, as we've mentioned before, time and again, in our observations and notes, every one of the principal actors and principal characters really brought their A game, especially Janeway, the Doctor, B'Elanna, especially 7-2. And I really want to make this a point. I thought, regardless of the actor, I thought the character of Icheb was very impressive in this episode.
Yeah.
I thought the performance was impressive. I thought the writing for Icheb was impressive. And obviously it led to a lot of our discussion points. His character arc so far has been pretty interesting to watch, with being a living weapon and now becoming kind of like this, a young man, at the start of his adolescence and understanding what that means. So what are the 2 factors then, that elevate this episode for me into my top 10 or top 5? Well, first of all, I love Star Trek episodes when they purposefully weave the analogy of a real world issue through the guise of science fiction, right? In this case, terminal illness or organ donation.
Yeah.
So what Icheb did for 7 wasn't really any different than, say, what a loved one would do or a friend would do, volunteering, they say, their kidney, or their liver or blood, to save another loved one or a friend. That's obvious, right? That the parallel is very, very stark. But the second factor is what really sets this episode apart for me and why it's elevated into this level of top 5. I'm going to say top 5. I'm just going to say it, top 5.
Okay. I love it.
Right.
I love it.
So John and I have said from time to time that Star Trek, the work itself is static, but it's we who are dynamic. And so are our perceptions of the content we watch or read or digest, in our fandoms. And a majority of that perspective changes as we grow older and endure what life throws at us, for better or worse, right? And for some of us, and me in particular, this episode speaks directly to us in a way where some would watch this as I watched this. And if I were 25 years old, right, I would say, it was a pretty good episode. I probably don't remember it, but it was pretty good. Today, me at 53, and after what I've experienced in life, having been diagnosed with brain cancer and after everything that I've been through, when I watch this episode, I see what this story is really trying to tell me, right? And I think that it speaks to a lot of people, probably more so than most people would actually admit or realize. I was blindsided by this episode in a lot of really great ways. And I think because following up Unimatrix Zero, I thought that as Voyager is going to kind of coast into the end of season 7. And I'm glad that I was proven wrong, because I thought this episode was tremendous. Yeah. And I hope that other people did as well. Did you, John? How did you feel about the episode?
I did. I mean, I think it just holds up really nicely as, from any number of angles. I think mostly, though, because of its emphasis on personal drama, and interpersonal drama. It is a bit of a soap opera, but Star Trek can be really effective like that. See also DS9. Sometimes you just get high concept, mind-blowing sci-fi, but then sometimes you got to ground it all again. And you take on these heavy topics like you just mentioned, this terminal diagnosis, and coupled with this concept of organ donation or, experimental medical technique, there are these things that make it very real. I feel like as an episode, okay, if there are a couple of problems, I think it's a bummer that we have to let go of the other Borg kids right away. And then when I rewatched it, I thought, okay, well, maybe for a story like this, maybe those other three kids would have felt in the way. And what you really needed to do is focus on the dynamic of Seven and Icheb, where Seven gets to be the mother figure, but also Seven and Janeway, where Janeway gets to be the mother figure and be concerned for her friend, but also this being that she has brought into her crew and made part of the family. Now, I think that purely from a writing for TV in the late 90s, early 2000s perspective, little bit of clunkiness in squeezing in this new alien threat and this little side trip over to the Borg debris field. And then you have to follow that with a chase and spaceships. Okay, I get it. Somebody said, you know what we need? We need to squeeze a little more action in this episode. And it's kind of a distraction. And that said, well, I'm not sure how else you do it, though. I'm not sure if we have that 3 to 5 minutes that we need to fill. Are we best served by spending that still on Voyager and having another interaction with Seven and somebody else? Maybe there is a missing Seven and Tuvok scene, or another Seven and Janeway scene, something else that could fill in that gap.
But don't you think that maybe because we saw that scene, it enhances or focuses on Janeway's resolve to find another Borg ship and to find a living Borg drone, because they've risked the first, salvage, and now they got to risk another one?
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. Janeway says that she will do these things, and we see her do those things to make extreme efforts to save Seven. I think that's good. I think the only moment of that really took me out of it is, okay, the swooping camera moments in this spaceship chase ended solely by, okay, they're gone. But again, that's purely me being a nitpicker with this episode, because it really is an episode that elevates everything that it touches. The performances are elevated, the stakes are elevated, and the strength of this episode truly is in those performances. Everybody delivered here, but especially Jerry, who can just do so much with the slightest look or slightest expression. And look, she has got one of the hardest jobs by being the Spock character, taking nothing away here from Tim being Tuvok, all right? But she has to be the Spock character here, who plays her emotions close to the chest, but then says so much to us, to the audience, to everybody around her, so realistically with those emotional moments that she has. It's a masterclass in doing that. And it really does make this episode special. Mm-hmm. And that brings us here to morals, meanings, messages. I alluded to it before. There are so many. And I look forward to hearing what else our audience takes away from this, because the moments here are lovely. They're very human. And that's Star Trek strength. Take these alien characters, take these foreign situations, and ultimately ground them into a very human, relatable way. Like I said, I wrote down a lot of lines that I thought were valid and kind of illuminated what the episode is about. And I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit, because there is a theme here about pain that you are willing to endure. Seven obviously is knocked off her feet by this whole thing, and she is uneasy, but she is also more than willing to sacrifice herself to protect Icheb, right? Janeway is willing to endure the hardships that she needs in order to protect Seven. And then ultimately, Icheb is willing to put himself on the line to protect Seven, i.e. his mother, in this context. So we see a lot of that, a lot of people taking on these burdens, taking on these hardships because of their care for someone else. You mentioned it earlier when you picked out this exchange that Icheb has with Janeway as we get to the finale of the episode. He says, you're the one who needs to rely. Oh, I'm sorry. He actually says it to Seven. Janeway's there in the room. You're the one who needs to rely on others. Isn't that what people on this ship do? Yeah, and that just that's the whole thesis about what people on Starfleet ships do, is they rely on each other all the time. And look, none of this is new ground for Star Trek, and this isn't new ground even for a solid piece of drama. But what makes it special is how we as the audience connect to these characters who we've gotten to know over 6 full seasons. And that just drives home the emotional impact even more. Now, I want to go back to that because I really want to focus in on this scene with B'Elanna and Seven having this discussion about what comes after death. Seven is having this existential crisis. And that scene is so good because B'Elanna says exactly the right words. I mean, wow. So it's not about the specifics of a life after death, but it's about the impact that you have on those around you. See also Star Trek the Motion Picture. See also Mortal Coil. See also Emanation. See also all these stories where Star Trek has dealt with life and death. And certainly don't forget, this similar existential crisis that Neelix had. I mentioned his episode, Mortal Coil, because Seven faces the exact same thing here. And having your eye on the afterlife, it takes you away from the important bonds from the here and now. And since that afterlife isn't known or guaranteed, you can actually ensure your legacy through the people you touch. That's what Seven does. That's what B'Elanna so beautifully, so gently reminds her of. It's like, no. You are special. And you have had an impact. And you will continue to have an impact. I love that moment. It is such a beautifully humanistic message. And it is so very Star Trek.
Yeah.
How about you, Norman?
Well, before I get to it, I'm very much on the same page here. And I think that this is probably one of the, more difficult episodes to find morals, meanings, or messages because there are so many and they are so Star Trek and they are so relevant then and now. But I'd like to set the stage for my answer with acting out a scene, if you would indulge me.
Oh, let's do it.
Right?
Love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in this scene, you'll play the Doctor and I will play Icheb.
Okay.
So early in the episode, the Doctor says,
she's not angry with you. She's just angry.
I don't understand.
It's a common response to serious illness. She's frustrated to be confined, embarrassed to appear vulnerable.
She shouldn't be embarrassed in front of me. I'm her friend.
And her pupil. She doesn't want you or anyone else to see her when she's not at her best.
It's not her fault that she's sick.
Of course not. But we have to allow her to deal with this in her own way, with as much dignity as possible. Give her time. She may decide she wants company, and if she does, you're the first person I'll call.
And later in the climax of the episode, Icheb says, what about you? You've refused to rely on a single member of this crew. You hid your condition from the rest of us, you deactivated the Doctor, and now you're rejecting my help. You're the one who needs to rely on the others. Isn't that what people on this ship do? They help each other. What I learned from this episode and from life itself, when it comes to a life-altering situation. Remember this. You don't have to go it alone. When I was diagnosed almost a year ago with my brain tumor, I felt exactly as Seven did when it came to navigating every single possible emotional outcome and response to what I was going through. John, you were talking about this earlier, the 5 stages of grief. Most of those mental gymnastics led to several and very clear resolutions and revelations, and I basically boiled it down to these terms. If you're not familiar with SWOT analysis, this is how my brain worked at that moment when I was diagnosed. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Something that I learned in sales and marketing. SWOT led to what now? What is the most optimal path from diagnosis to cure, right? And in my SWOT analysis, I learned one very important lesson. Again, SWOT analysis was how I compartmentalized my emotions, which were pretty much running wild at the time, and then the logic of how I get from diagnosis to cure. In my SWOT analysis, I learned one very important lesson, and this is where I think the scenes that we performed are perhaps some of the most poignant scene I've seen in Voyager so far. I learned that in both strengths and opportunities of the SWOT analysis, I realized that there are people who love me, friends who care for me, and medical professionals who were so very ready to let me lean on them for care and support during my chemotherapy. This is Janeway and the Doctor and Icheb in that same fashion. These are the roles that people play in your life. Roles that you too will one day play for them. Or sometimes for people you've never met. It's up to you to let that happen. To open those doors for people. To open those doors for yourself and to accept the love and care from others. Believe me that this is the kind of strength that you can't begin to describe, to draw that kind of power and that energy to get you through these kinds of difficult times, not just for yourself, but for other people too. So, like the lesson 7 learns in this episode, you have to let people in. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable in front of them and for yourself, and to accept their help. With life-threatening situations like hers, or life-threatening situations or illnesses like advanced cancers or diseases or critical diagnoses, there are more people than you will ever know that are willing to help you if you just let them.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Drive.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shavel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. We have just received a text message from the Borg. It reads as follows: please send notes. LOL. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.